I'd like to turn your attention to the north side, and if you look over to the far end of the north side, you can see the Allegheny Observatory. And the reason why I point that out to you is that two men who worked at the original observatory were really instrumental in climate change, and a lot of Pittsburghers don't know that. The two men were John Brashear and Samuel Pierpont Langley. It turns out Samuel Pierpont Langley was a brilliant scientist. He was the innovator. Pittsburgh at that time was the leading innovation city in the world. And Langley and Brashear worked on the flying machine before the Wright brothers. They developed the science of flight, and Langley ended up turning it over to the Wright brothers. But more to our point this evening, Langley he had a plan for a device called the bolometer, and he had Brashear design it for him. He and Brashear were very close partners on all projects. At any rate, this bolometer was used to measure the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and led to savant Arrhenius's prediction in 1896 that if we don't stop putting carbon in the sky, we're going to cause a 2 degrees Celsius warming of the planet. And that work was done right here in Pittsburgh. And if you look at Arrhenius's work, he references the Brashear-Langley project. I should also tell you that Langley and Brashear also calculated the amount of energy coming from the sun and determined that the sun energy was available for us to do incredible things. And Langley actually developed a unit of measurement for solar energy. It's called the Langley. So if you want to figure out how much energy is hitting your house, you use the Langley, which is developed right here in Pittsburgh. So both on the solution side and on the problem side, these people were great leaders. They inspired me as a youngster. My grandmother was actually Brashear's granddaughter, and so I heard all the Brashear stories from my grandmother, and that really inspired me to take interest in the natural world and to understand perhaps some of the science involved. The challenge we face today, and incidentally, one of my friends joked recently that President Trump picked Pittsburgh because he wanted to make me angry. He didn't say it in those words, but I was in Mexico when it happened, which was even more disheartening because I felt like I was on an apology tour when I was supposed to be on vacation. But nonetheless, what we're facing today is unprecedented, and it is very deeply troubling to me as a grandfather. And my number one credential today is as a grandfather. I have 5 grandkids. And as I look at their world that they're going to inherit, it makes me very, very troubled. I recently got a note from Dr. Bob Correll, who did the Arctic assessment. And Dr. Correll had 350 scientists working with him. And he sent me an email the other day, and he said, Larry, the Arctic system is no longer attached to the carbon reduction program because it's giving up its own carbon. It's now releasing enough carbon into the sky from the Arctic itself to trump what we're putting into the sky. And that's why you see these wide ranging temperature shifts that we've seen in the last year in the Arctic. There were 5 times in the Arctic this past winter when the temperature was over 20 degrees warmer than it normally would be at that time of the year. So we're seeing a very dramatic shift, and that's because the carbon and the methane coming out of the Arctic is now so tremendous that it's interfering with the system itself. It's not recovering the way it had. So we've hit a tipping point. So hearing the top scientists, the man who did the Arctic assessment with 350 scientists telling me that the Arctic is over a tipping point, just troubled me to my deepest parts of my body. It just was heartbreaking. And then this past week, we saw an article coming out of Antarctica. The Antarctic is losing an iceberg the size of the state of Delaware. The size of the state of Delaware. This iceberg is going to be breaking off probably within the next couple of weeks. It's within 8 miles of completely severing itself from the Antarctic. It will be the largest iceberg ever recorded in human history. So we're seeing the breakup of Antarctica, We're seeing the rapid melt of the Arctic. We're seeing the clathrites in the oceans give off methane. The tundra itself is giving off carbon dioxide and methane. Nature's getting into the game in a way that's very, very troubling. Meanwhile, in Washington, we have these people having this conversation about abandoning all of our efforts to reduce carbon emissions. It's unbelievable. And the science is clear. It's not a matter of speculation. It hasn't been for years. There's over 10,000 peer-reviewed published studies now that warn us that the climate system is coming unhinged. And we've known it now for well over 100 years. And we've failed to act. In fact, we've done the opposite. I worked back in the 90s, early 90s, on the effort to get the Kyoto Agreement. And I'll tell you a little bit inside story on that. First of all, in 1988, when Al Gore announced he was going to run for president, I was with him at that announcement, urging him to do that because he was committed to tackling the climate crisis. He got as far as California, and his then wife, Tipper, was attacked for a book that she wrote called How to Raise PG Kids in the X-Rated World. And they destroyed Al in California. He lost the California primary, so he was out of the race. But nonetheless, he committed himself to working on the climate issue as a senator, held many hearings. Dr. James Hansen, you may remember, testified that we were doing all these bad things to our world. Most people ignored that. Al ended up becoming, as you know, vice president. And Senator Tim Wirth, who was a very dear friend of Senator John Hines. Senator Wirth and Senator Hines were best friends in college. They roomed together in college. And they both worked as U.S. senators, one from Pennsylvania, the other from Colorado. Well, Senator Wirth, after Senator Hines' death, was so disturbed he ended up leaving the Senate over that. He was really heartbroken over the loss of his dearest friend. And he and Hines did a lot of wonderful things together. I worked with them on acid rain control, so they're really tremendous leaders. But all right, Senator Wirth then became, the first time ever, the Undersecretary of State for the Environment. That's a shorthand title. And as the Undersecretary, Tim Wirth went to the Kyoto conference and hammered out what was then known as the Kyoto Agreement, which was based, incidentally, on the acid rain control program that Senator Hines and Senator Wirth had developed back in the early days. It was a cap and trade program. It was a free market program. It allowed industries to buy and sell their pollution credits if they reduced carbon at a certain rate. And the rest of the nations adopted that. But when Tim brought it back to the U.S., there was one senator willing to vote for this treaty. The rest of the senators absolutely rejected, 99 to 1, the treaty that was hammered out based on U.S. experience, based on our established experience on controlling acid rain. So at any rate, that was it was signed by President Clinton but never ratified. And as a result of that, the rest of the countries lost hope in the Kyoto Agreement. And instead of cutting carbon emissions by about 10%, since Kyoto, the carbon emissions have gone up 56%. So since 1990, we saw a dramatic increase in the amount of carbon dioxide being put into the air. We were putting about 1 part per million into the atmosphere back in those days. We're now putting 3 parts per million total new carbon in the sky every year. So the numbers are ticking up. If you look at it from an industrial standpoint, pre-industry we were 281 parts per million. Today we're 400 and nearly 410 parts per million. So we've seen over a 40% increase in the amount of carbon dioxide in the sky. So we're facing this moment of making better choices. And so President Obama, a lot of folks may not know this, but President Obama came out of Illinois as a coal state senator. And he was actually not enthusiastic about climate change. He in fact would characterize the effort as clean coal. He campaigned on that. He would not sign on to a climate bill while he was in the Senate. We had to put a lot of pressure on him. Finally agreed to it. Well, later, as you all know, as he became president, he found out how serious the climate issue was. Dr. John Holdren, who is a friend, former head of a research center at Harvard, Dr. Holdren and others convinced President Obama that this was a serious matter. They worked with him over the first 4 years of his presidency. And you may remember when he was sworn in for the second time, he made climate a centerpiece of his talk. But he was really not originally connected with climate change, but yet he gets accused or blamed, whatever you want to say, for the Paris Agreement. Now, the good news is that President Obama decided that this was real and he needed to act on it, and he went to the Copenhagen Agreement. Prior to that, all the nations were working on an agreement that would be mandatory and everybody would have to sign on. Well, when President Obama went to Copenhagen, he finally convinced them that he would never be able to get the U.S. Senate to ratify a treaty that required carbon pollution. So they changed the strategy from Copenhagen to Paris to be a voluntary program to allow every nation to set its own targets and to have a voluntary program based on a mutual commitment to one to another. And that's what we have today. Paris is really the creation of President Obama to find a way forward in light of the fact that we could not get senators, including our own Senator Toomey, who has taken tremendous amounts of money from the fossil fuel interests. So anyway, we have a complicated situation, but Paris at least was going to cut our emissions by 30% by 2030. So it was a relatively reasonable kind of approach, not bold enough to get the job done, but to get us started in the right path. And today we see what President Trump is doing. He's not only abandoning Paris, but he's also committed to unwinding the clean power rules that were hammered out over almost a 4-year period by the Obama EPA. He is also unleashing the nation's energy resources that are on public lands. There's a move afoot to start selling off or giving away our public lands to get more energy out of them. One of the places that breaks my heart, and there's a number of them, but one of them is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, one of the greatest places in the world, 16 million acres of untrammeled natural areas. The Gwich'in people who live there actually will never go into the Arctic plain where they want to drill because they see that as sacred soil, because the Arctic caribou herd reproduces there and the young are raised in the Arctic plain. And they see that as a very, very fragile place that should never be touched. They were offered a $30 million gift from the oil industry to allow them to go in there, and they turned it down. I visited the Arctic village. These people go to the bathroom in plastic 5-gallon buckets. And one of the elders told me, he said, we do this because we could have had a sewage system. They were offering to build us a new sewage system up here that was insulated, and we turned it down because we think this is a more important issue. So these people were really amazing, and they stood up for the greed that others have fallen for. And now President Trump wants to go in there, overruling the Gwich'ins and overruling the tribes that have an interest in the Arctic, and go into this area and drill for oil. We don't need it. He's also opening up our petroleum reserves. Again, it doesn't make any sense. There's already a glut of oil on the planet, and he's opening up these oil reserves that are meant for national security. So there's a whole series of things that I could go on and on about. But, I have to say, the thing that keeps me focused on getting a better climate outcome is my grandchildren. My middle daughter asked me to come into the delivery room when she was delivering her first son, and she said, "Dad, I want you to cut the umbilical cord." I said, "Really?" Because back when we had our children, I was barely able to get in after about a week or two of training and learning breathing exercises and all that stuff. Well, anyway, I was in the delivery room with my daughter, and this little guy was was being born, and I had these incredibly powerful mixed emotions. On one hand, I was so excited to see my little grandson emerge, and on the other hand, I was so struggling with the idea that he's leaving the safest place he'll ever be and entering a world that's much more dangerous because of what we're doing to his world. And so as he emerged, the doctor handed me the scissors and said, it's your turn. And I was recommitting myself to a vow that I made when I was 14 years old on Lake Erie, a vow that I made when I saw how bad Lake Erie was deteriorated back in those days, that I would spend my career working to protect the environment. And so I was recommitting myself to that vow that I had made. And I must have been taking too long because the doctor finally looked at me and said, "Are you going to do this thing or what?" And of course, then I was moved to do that. But we have an obligation. I don't know of a single parent or a single grandparent who would knowingly destroy their kid's world. And yet that's exactly what we're allowing to happen today. We're allowing our kids' world to be destroyed. Because I'll guarantee you, if we don't turn this ship around in a fast way, our kids are going to be living in a hell that's hard to imagine. We're already seeing signs of that with the storm disruptions. I was looking at the sea level rise, and the Waikiki Beach last week was flooded. It was actually flooded into the city because of sea level rise. On Bluebird days in Miami, they have floods on the streets that bring fish into their streets. So we're seeing the sea level rise happen already. The New York Times did a piece last week about the disappearance of Tangier Island in the Chesapeake Bay. That's only one of many, many islands across this planet. There's literally, if the sea level rise goes to 3 feet, which is almost guaranteed now, we're going to displace 100 million people. 100 million people are going to have to move off of their lands with a 3-foot sea level rise. And Bob Corral and his scientists were telling us that we're going to see perhaps 6 to 9 feet in this century of sea level rise. So we're already moving in a very, very dangerous and troubling way. And we need to do everything we possibly can. And that brings me back to Pittsburgh. I'm heartened by the promise that the mayor has made to get us to 100% carbon-free energy. And I think we need to stand behind the mayor and the other leading officials who have made similar declarations and find ways to work together to move that challenge forward. Because it's one thing to make a promise, another thing to actually deliver on it. And it's time for us to deliver on that promise. And we can do a lot in our homes. Scott was talking about some of the things that he has done, and I only wish he would have told me about his selling of his Tesla before he got rid of it. I could handle a used car. But at any rate, we all need to be looking at how we can change our own lifestyles and be models for our community to solve this climate crisis. Solar panels are coming down rapidly. You can buy wind power right now off of companies that offer it. And I can assure you that we're talking about a few pennies of energy costs. It's quite small. And so the opportunities are here for us to do that. And I would urge everyone to, if you haven't already, to do that. I think there's a lot of things that we can do together. Our state legislature, having worked there for 10 years, I can tell you that our state legislature is controlled by the natural gas industry. And the last time I checked, it was a fossil fuel. So we're moving from coal to gas. A little bit less carbon, but certainly not the environmental solution that people are looking for or should be striving to achieve. We are going in the wrong direction on our energy development. Right now there are 30 gas-fired power plants either under construction or being proposed in Pennsylvania. If you think we can get to a safe environment with 30 new gas-fired power plants, I can help you with that issue. It's just not going to happen. And some of our lawmakers right here in Western Pennsylvania are some of the worst, for supporting that, including our speaker from my hometown. So I want to stop with that, but I would like to open it up for some questions. I covered a lot of landscape, but I'd really be interested in hearing from you some of the issues that you might be thinking about, some of the things that are on your mind. And perhaps I missed some key points. Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering about the Tillerson influence on the president, since he is, a big executive, but yet he was the one, I believe, that was also encouraging him to stay in the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, Rex Tillerson, who I call Exxon Tillerson. Tillerson, for years, had as the CEO of Exxon, which is one of the largest, it is the largest carbon creator on the planet, had known, that Exxon has known since the 70s. They actually hired some of the top scientists in the world in the 1970s. And these scientists came back with a comprehensive report, warned Exxon that they needed to wean themselves from carbon. Exxon suppressed that science, and they had a back channel email network where all the top Exxon employees, including Rex, had been communicating about the issues of climate science. They've been talking about it for years. Meanwhile, they've been representing to their stockholders that they don't have a portfolio risk with all this carbon in their portfolio, which is fraudulent. And so my dear friend Al Gore and a number of state attorney generals got together, 18 of them, and filed a lawsuit against Exxon to disclose their carbon footprint, and also to challenge them on this matter of fraud, because they were in fact involved in fraud. He had a different name on the internet. He had a Gmail account. He still has yet to turn those records over. So he's under investigation right now as our Attorney General for fraud, and led by the New York Attorney General. I think they're going to eventually catch up to him and get him. So that's why he's pretending that he cares about climate change. He was one of the major funders, along with the Koch brothers, to create this effort to delude and mislead the American public. I can tell you, we fought for years against Exxon and the Koch brothers and these others who were pumping all this money into confusing the American public. And they did a pretty good job of it, because we have one of the highest levels of doubt in the world. So he's actually playing a game, and I think he's going to get caught. In my view, that if you look at Exxon's record in the world, they have done some incredibly mean things to a number of countries. They've cut deals with some of the most heinous leaders of any country, and they have a terrible record. And the idea that he's our Secretary of State representing us in the world just is appalling to me, because I've spent a big part of my career fighting Exxon and the things that they do. I should also tell you, I was involved in the Exxon Valdez spill. I was in Alaska that week when it happened. We actually filed a lawsuit against Exxon, and through a number of efforts, they ended up blocking our lawsuit. And they also promised to help out all the watermen that they hurt. They ended up paying a penny on the dollar to the watermen, and only that after 19 years of fighting. In fact, 20% of the watermen had died before they ever got compensated. And over half of them ended up in divorce and bankruptcy because of the Exxon pollution. And they never compensated the people of Cordova or the people who were impacted by the Valdez spill. So this company has a terrible record. It's truly, I don't buy any Exxon gas. I haven't bought it for years. And I avoid it. So thanks for the question. Yes?
What about the possibility of a carbon fee and dividend as proposed by the Citizens Climate Lobby, a conservative solution to climate change? What about, do you think that the group in the House representatives, the climate caucus that the CCL helped to build, 38 members now, 19 Republican, 19 Democrat, do you think that group has any...
Well, that's a very hopeful thing. I just heard today that Jeff Immelt is retiring from GE. I don't know if you all heard that or not. Jeff actually chaired the committee that I served on with the the so-called Cap and Trade Committee. It was U.S. Cap. We worked for a number of years to get that bill introduced. President Obama came and ultimately supported it, and we were shut down by the industry. Today, the movement you're talking about has a lot of traction. A lot of folks are working hard, getting a number of members to sign up on both sides of the aisle. So I'm really impressed and pleased with that momentum and the effort that's building there. I would only urge the people that are leading that effort to understand at the end of the day, it probably is, so many things happen in legislation. They start out looking like horses and they come out looking like camels. And at this stage, I'm willing to accept a camel. And what I think may happen before this is all over, I think you're going to see some of the industries get a tax break in conjunction with this legislation by the time it finally gets to the point where it's going to move. But we've got a long way to go before that. It's still in the earlier stages. But I highly recommend folks support the effort and try to push for that kind of an outcome.
I think California has a similar bill under consideration to revamp their cap and trade program, which
Yep.
the emission shares are way too cheap. They're trying to make it stronger, but they should have been inserting something like the CCL cap, carbon fee dividend.
Yep. No, I completely agree with either a price on carbon, either through a cap and trade or on a taxation approach. And whatever can get us across the finish line, I'm totally in favor of. I'm really agnostic when it comes to the final bill, so long as it does the job that we need it to do to protect my kids. And so for me, that's the criteria that I'm going to be using, in my efforts. And I should tell you that the community that I've worked with for a long time feels the same way. We've tried every which way to get a piece of legislation passed. So this is coming from the grassroots, and we're trying to encourage that to the extent that we can. George Frampton is working on another piece. You might want to look at George's efforts because he's trying to bring in some of the more conservative members, which need to be in that final equation when it comes. So hopefully we'll be able to get that done. Good question. Yes.
There seems to be a problem in some states now with solar, people putting in solar. They're taking away any incentives. Nevada did it, and I think a couple southern states are trying to reverse how much energy they need to buy from alternative sources.
That's a good example where the dark money funders, Koch and others, have put money into this group called ALEC. And ALEC has been spending money buying state legislators. And incidentally, we're having the same thing here in Pennsylvania. Our building standards are completely out of date here in Pennsylvania. We have 2009 building standards. The new standards move us into energy efficiency and a lot of other really important things. And our state legislature has been blocking that. And they're now also unwinding some of the successes that were accomplished 10 years ago on clean energy. So our legislature is in the pocket of ALEC, and a number of other states are as well. And it's because the money is there. There's so much dark money floating around since the Citizens United, and they don't need to disclose it. It really is corrupting our political system. I've spent enough time both in Washington and Harrisburg to see what dark money has done to our lawmakers, and it's very disturbing. Yes.
Larry, speaking of dark money, and I'm curious because you spent so much time with Mr. Gore, the idea of you first attitude with a lot of these industries, are they are politicians and the different people that really want the climate change to start from the top down, folks like Nestle's, that are collecting and privatizing water, that have actually sold people on the idea of getting used to having, plastic water and all these things that were the original polluters. The everyday person, we all want clean environments for our families and ourselves. With the carbon tax, are they only focusing on the pollution being carbon, and not all these other derivatives of multiple conglomerate pollution to create economies. The thing that I think a lot of us are wondering is, are they going to do a me first attitude rather than profit from and continue to do what they're doing while they're making all the everyday people feel guilty to have to take on the burden?
Well,
what is your
great question. Incidentally, I haven't called Al in the last 24 hours. You can understand why. The game didn't end well for his team. But the thing I would say about what you've brought up is that there are a number of things that need to be corrected. Climate change is the top of the list, but there's a whole series of other things that are happening that we need to pay attention to, and the monetizing of drinking water is one of those things. I personally believe that water is a human right and should be available to every person. Clean water, and we don't have clean water in this city, incidentally, and it's appalling. I mean, it's appalling that we're allowing children to drink lead. We had the same company here in Pittsburgh that was in Flint, but we've not had the attention drawn to this problem. Dr. Herbert Needleman, who did the original lead in the human environment research, was a dear friend of mine, and Herb made it clear that these kids have about a 4-point lower IQ because of lead exposures. They have learning disabilities. They have a whole set of other health issues that relate to the lead in the environment. And we knew that for years, and yet we were allowing this to happen. So clearly, water is another issue. The environment, there's a whole set of environmental issues, and industry has been glomming on to the opportunities. And you point out one. There are a number of examples where the industries have moved in and have privatized public assets. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for example, promises everybody to have clean water in our Constitution, and yet we see a lot of privatization going on here. And for example, when a gas company takes public water out of the river and pumps it into the ground where it never shows up again, that's privatizing that public asset, and we should be making them accountable for those kind of actions.
But just a quick follow-up on that. Do you happen to believe that there might be a connection between all the derivative pollutions and that practices that some of these global conglomerates do that might also feed the climate change or some kind of connection between those two, where it's not necessarily just us feeling that it's the CO2 perchance that's the only thing. Obviously, that's definitely an effect, but these other things as well, especially if say like 5 different industries might be adding so much more to it than maybe what we are doing by just breathing.
The good news here in the United States is we have a really good handle on where our carbon pollution is coming from. EPA, back in 1990 when we got the acid rain control bill, we also set up a system to track carbon dioxide under that legislation. So we have a good idea where the climate changing emissions are coming from. And it's not just carbon dioxide, but it's the big one. Carbon dioxide is the big one. Second to that is methane. Methane is growing rapidly as well. And then there are these other trace gases that are also problematic. The chlorofluorocarbons, for example, there's a whole set of other chemicals. But they make up a smaller portion of the total problem. The big one is the carbon dioxide. And it's coming out of our soils now. As they heat up soils, they give off more carbon dioxide. The boreal forests of Canada are giving off carbon dioxide, not storing it. The tundra is giving off carbon dioxide. So we have a lot of natural sources that were frozen and are now thawing out and being released. So there's a number of places where it's coming from. And of course, a lot of large companies recognize their carbon emissions. Some are doing something about it. Others are trying to avoid doing anything until the last moment. I think we have some good examples of companies that are doing the right thing. Incidentally, on the politics and on Al Gore, Al often reminds me when I get discouraged that our politics have been hacked. He admits that. He said, but politics is a renewable resource, and it's up to us to renew that resource. And I think that's, for me, a real heartening promise that we have. And here's a man who knows it. I mean, he knows politics, having been hacked in 2000, he understands that probably better than anyone. But we now have an opportunity to renew that resource. I think there are some things that we need to do to change. My daughter is running for town council in McCandless. That's an ad. And one of the things I found, we had 15% turnout in that race this year. 15%. 15 in McCandless. So we have a problem, and it's us. You know, we're the problem. We need to be out, and I say us, I'm talking about the collective us. We need to be out, we need to be voting, we need to take back our democracy. And that's what Al was referring to, and I believe that more clearly today than anything. So thank you for that question.
I think we'll talk for one more question.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait a minute. With dark money, there are 400 or 500 families, mega billionaires, that are controlling our government.
Yeah.
And every appointment that Trump has made that made no sense to any of us makes sense to the Koch brothers and that elite group. How do we fight that?
We're the citizens.
I'm sorry, what?
We need to get rid of citizens.
Middle class people would make sense to them too, and that's what's really frightening to me. People get hurt
The
the
Trumpsters
most.
agree.
Yes, they're going to get hurt the most, and they support this. I can't even say that.
Yeah, I don't know. I try to stay tuned into the broader community to the extent that I can, and it's amazing to me. We're living in two different worlds here in this country, more than I've ever seen before. There are those who care deeply, and I think this room is made up of people who care deeply about what's happening to our world. So you're a part of a very important segment of our society. And then there's this other group that you referred to a few minutes ago that don't care.
They don't care.
The billionaires don't care, mostly. There are a couple that do, but mostly they don't. And then there's this other group who don't care that they don't care. And they've completely uncoupled from what's going on, and they get their news in dark places, frankly. And they're missing the message, and I think it's up to us who understand this stuff to go out and communicate that to the community in any way that we can. And I don't have a magic bullet on that. In fact, I think Scott wants us to get around the tables and talk about that to see if we can come up with some ideas on how we go from here to where we need to go, and pick your brains a bit, because frankly, I'm fresh out of ideas on how to turn this corrupted democracy that we're now living in back to a healthy, sustainable nation that cares about its own kids. So that's my hope, that we can figure out how to do that. And I think if we can figure out how to do that here in Pittsburgh, we can do it elsewhere. We can replicate that out into other places. So we'll see how that all works out, but I'll turn it back to Scott to fix the world.